We are live.
Good afternoon and welcome to our LinkedIn live chat. I'm really excited today to be here with two of my favorite colleagues. We're going to explore using the technique of tokenization and how it's really transformed linking clinical trial data to real world data, and also linking healthcare claims data that we've all worked with for a long time to external data sets, which has always been really challenging. We can supplement data on social risk factors. We can link to test and lab results, data registries. The results are endless here. So Inovalon's data insights research team is doing, I think, really cutting edge research in these emerging areas. And I've got two experts here today to help us understand it all and tell us how it's done. So let's do some quick introductions and jump right in. I'm Christy. I'm a VP in our Research Science Advanced Analytics team. I've been with Inovalon for about 12 years, so working with our data assets for a very long time. But my focus has been both on the health plan side as well as the life science side, kind of bridging that gap. But I've really focused during that entire time on health disparities and health equity. Allison and Jen, please say hello and introduce yourselves.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Allison Petrilla. I lead the Health Economics and Outcomes Research team here at Inovalon. Been with this organization for about 10 years, really excited with where we're going in terms of data and analytics and doing some really cool stuff. Christy has taught me everything I know about social drivers of health and the applications of it. So excited to talk through this with all of you. And also want to say, Jen and Christy, happy Women's History Month.
Thank you, Alice. And hi, everyone. I'm Jen Lampa. I lead our clinical development flavored analytics here at Inovalon. I have over a decade of experience in applying real-world data to all the different types of clinical development, from pre-market through to real-world evidence. And I'm a big real-world data nerd at heart as well. So very excited to spend the better part of the next 30 minutes with these two amazing female leaders.
And thank you both for highlighting that we are all women, and it is Women's History Month. When I started the PhD program in economics, way longer ago than I want to admit, I was the only woman in the program, and things have changed, but not that much. But here we are. So, and we are with some of the experts in technology and healthcare research. I know you have both worked extensively with life science companies using real-world data to better understand patient populations and improve outcomes of care. Can you each give us an example or two of how your work with these organizations has really pushed the boundaries of, traditional evidence generation models? Allison, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think to talk about kind of where we are now, you've got to go back to where did we come from. I think about over the years that I've been doing real world evidence and working with closed claims data and EMR data and survey data, all these different disparate data sources. For a long period of time, we were really limited to demographics that constituted, think of our table 1 in a manuscript. And often the very best we could offer in terms of characteristics of a population might have been age, sex, geographic region, maybe we know their insurance type, and that was kind of it, right? Like we couldn't do a whole lot more than that. And it didn't really get to what's driving access to care in the diagnostic journey, and why are there so many delays in getting to the right specialist and the right treatment at the right time, and addressing all of that unmet need. We see this a lot in the Medicare space, where every single Medicare analysis I do, our customer will say, well, gosh, why is the rate of treatment so low? Are you sure that's right? And we're saying, yep, it's right. Think about the characteristics of this population and the age and the disability components related to the benefit design. And that's going to drive and influence treatment decisions and access to innovative therapies. And these are the things that I think we have a much better appreciation for. And Christy, your tutelage in this area of social drivers of health and why it's so important is really pioneering research. So I thank you for the groundbreaking work that you've done in this area. You've taught us a lot. And I see on the life sciences side that there's a paradigm shift going from the kind of out of the box transactional evidence to really thinking early on in the drug development cycle around what that strategy should be for identifying care gaps and understanding the social drivers of health, which drives a great proportion of clinical outcomes, and what are the strategies they can take. And I think the most significant thing is we've always thought of, and myself included for a long time, that you have your clinical development phase, and then you go into real world evidence, and then you go into, post-market activities. But I think we're seeing a real shift in how real world data and real world evidence can also inform trial design and address a lot of these strategies and considerations much earlier in the development cycle. I know this is a topic that's near and dear to Jen's heart. Jen, what would you say?
It is. So all of those themes that you just hit on, Allison, around the sort of profound complexity of how treatments are finding their way to patients in the real world and the disparities that exist there, that now becomes the basis for how new, better study design happens, right? Enabling more access to diversity. And, maybe we'll circle back around to that topic later. The other thing that's really exciting that I'm personally very passionate about is FDA and other regulatory bodies becoming increasingly receptive to real world evidence over traditional prospective evidence generation, or alongside of or integrated into, right? So our understanding of the ability to generate real world evidence that is fit for that purpose is co-evolving with this increasing receptivity. And it provides a lot of opportunity for life science companies to pursue novel study designs, to do things differently and better, right, than the way that we did before, right, with traditional sponsored studies. Christy, you actually posted recently on LinkedIn a publication of ours showing left atrial appendage exclusion, a study that we did to support what ended up being a label expansion for AFib patients. And that's just one, really exciting example of how the paradigm is shifting, right? Not only is that a study that might have been operationally difficult to achieve because of the complexities surrounding the underlying patient population, right? The contraindications to certain medications. It might have also been a study that didn't make financial sense for a life sciences company to pursue. And we're sort of at this place where, now that we have novel ways of generating evidence, we can consider alternatives to the traditional method to gain patients access to new treatment. Tokenization is actually one of the main technologies that's enabling a lot of the integration that we're seeing, particularly within real world data as well as between real world and clinical data.
Yeah, absolutely. And those studies can get pretty complex, as the manuscript we just published. The FDA wants a lot, but luckily, with all the data we have, we can do all of that. We can do let's face it, they're using these devices, using these drugs off label. So we do have a big population of patients that we can say, yeah, and look, in these people, here's what's happening, and here's why we believe that it's possible to use this drug for this other purpose, or this device for this other purpose. So it's very exciting, and hopefully can advance the science a little quicker. But back to what you just mentioned about tokenization. Okay, it's the new buzzword. I'm pretty sure a lot of us don't really understand exactly what is tokenization. How does it work? Allison, I know you've done a lot of work with tokens. Maybe you can help us understand what it is and how does it change the way we do healthcare research?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of buzz. So tokenization, you can think of it as essentially it's a tool, it's an algorithm that allows you to take personally identifiable information. So think about your name, your address, your birth date, maybe your social security number, maybe a healthcare ID number, any of those different types of characteristics that are personal and very sensitive. And it creates a de-identified key. You could think of it often, it might be an alphanumeric configuration that if we were to look at it after it goes through an algorithm, it doesn't mean anything to us. It no longer says Christy Teiglin. Now it's a series of characters and numbers and symbols. And that can't be, in some cases, you might be able to maneuver and re-identify under certain use cases. In other cases, like once it's locked into that key, like that's it. There's no re-engineering it. We'll never know who this alphanumeric record belongs to. And what's most important here is that going through these algorithms and tokenizing patient data is what allows us to bridge together disparate data sets. And when one entity runs through a tokenization process on their side with their data and another entity does the same thing, they're able to use the tokens to link up these data sets and be able to see a more holistic picture on patient care. Really simple examples would be taking closed claims data and linking to laboratory results or linking to disease registry information, or there's many different use cases that we've worked with. Jen and I are actually doing a webinar on April 2nd through ISPOR, which is the Professional Society for Pharmacoeconomics and Outcomes Research, where we're going to be talking about tokenization. And as part of that webinar, we're going to be providing a roadmap that researchers and study sponsors can use as they're starting to think about tokenization for their respective research needs and strategic imperatives. And what are some of the steps that you need to think through very early on before you ever get to linked data? Like once you get to the linked data, yeah, that's fun. That's a lot of fun to be able to bring those pieces of information together. But there's a lot of very important privacy considerations that have to be approved, addressed long before you ever bring that information together. And that's something that we've solved for internally. And we've had a lot of success with different engagements where we're bringing together that rich resource utilization cost information, that rich clinical information, and being able to tell a more comprehensive story. An example I could give you is we had a research partnership with a study sponsor who wanted to understand how a specific testing mechanism was being used in the real world. And within closed claims, of course, we can identify patient populations. We can identify, was the test administered? Was there a hospitalization? Like all of these different factors we can identify. But understanding the test result and how that informed treatment decision and when it was used in the diagnostic and treatment paradigm was information that we had to layer on electronic health record data. We layered on the genetic testing result data. And now we had a clear picture of when this test was being used by specialists. And the most interesting thing that came out of this was we found that the test was being used much earlier in the diagnostic period, as opposed to further downstream after multiple treatment failures. So really interesting insights that come out once you start to bridge these pieces of information. So we're really excited to be in this area. And I'm thrilled, Jen, with the work that you're doing in the clinical trial space. I think that is just fascinating. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a team effort, right? One of the things that I love most about Inovalon is that we have such an experienced group of outcomes researchers that, have decades of combined experience working with real world data. And that's really the cream of the crop, right? When it comes to applying that historical knowledge to novel use cases. In terms of novel use cases, I would say, tokenized clinical trials is definitely on the innovation curve. The ability of using tokens in study patients to enable novel study designs like hybrid clinical and real world data collection efforts it creates near endless permutations, right, of how you can now generate evidence, almost overwhelming at times, frankly. I remember in the not too distant past, we started out looking at this as a way to just bring together disparate data sources, without needing to transact personally identifiable information. So from a patient sensor, a live patient sensor, and perhaps a real world data feed, and from the patient's charts, as well as the prospective data collection in the EDC. And now we can bring in our own closed claims data and integrate, the sort of cost-effective type healthcare resource utilization and cost of care information. We can look historically at what happened to a patient in the years leading up to when they first presented and were screened for a study. And we can look beyond when a study ends to see what's happening to that patient longer term. And we can do that without, necessarily having to keep sites up and running and collecting patients that way. So this sort of passive approach to study data collection is, really novel, and there are so many places that we can go from it, from here with it. I'm glad that it's becoming more broadly utilized, and I'm very excited about the future potential of this to bridge, the historical sort of very clean, almost ivory tower type flavor of evidence that happens in the pre-market phase, and that more, raw real world evidence that happens in the post-market phase. In particular, I'm excited about the potential for that transformation to support health equity, right? Which we know is a big challenge. And Christy, you're one of I would call you my mentor in this space, one of the people I look up to the most when it comes to health equity research.
Well, thank you. And it is why I come to work every day, because I do get to do this work that is just so tremendously exciting. I mean, think about what you both just said, is that we are now able to answer questions that we couldn't even consider answering before. We didn't have the means to do it because we couldn't put all of the data pieces, the puzzles, right? If you're missing that one piece of the puzzle, you can't see what the thing's going to look like, right? And so we can answer new questions, we can generate new evidence, the real world gets really messy, but we want everyone to benefit from these new treatments and devices. So, I mean, let me just underscore how, how tokenization can support the growing efforts to achieve health equity. Let's define health equity. It's just attaining the highest level of care possible for all people. So, the ability to use real world data to identify and characterize specific populations, patients with diabetes, patients with heart disease, but importantly, to be able to link in factors on their social drivers of health, factors like low income or low language proficiency that might be limiting their access to care, or their inability to understand why they should take their medications, or even how to get their medications, or if they live alone. Loneliness is a huge driver of poor health outcomes. You're 7 times more likely to be admitted to the emergency room. So you need to have that data to link it into your outcomes data to understand where the disparities are if you are going to achieve health equity. We've all talked about health disparities for a very long time, but I think the pandemic really brought into, laser focus the disparate impact that it had on the most disadvantaged, right, members of our society. Things got real, right? Mm-hmm. And so nowadays I see companies connecting the moral imperative, right? We all know, I think, I hope and believe it's the right thing to do, but with the strategic one related to improving the bottom line. Because to your point, if you are not addressing these other social drivers of health, what contributes to up to 80% of health outcomes beyond just the clinical care that we get, we are never going to have the best outcomes for all people. And so providers don't always understand how they're performing against their peers, where their health disparity issues might be, and where members have social drivers that need to be addressed. And so there's a real need to link the real world outcomes data with SDOH data. As you all know, I'm passionate about it, but I'm really excited to see both health plans and life science companies show great interest in, it's almost, I think, a given, right, guys? Part of our studies now, I think, Allison, you would agree. Nobody comes to us and says, no, don't bother including the social determinants of health data. And we have a great SDOH data warehouse that we built over the last decade at Inovalon. I think one of the best in the nation. And we can link in this data at a very near neighborhood granular level that is just highly, predictive of health outcomes and health behaviors. So I'm really proud of the work that we do also. Jen, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how health equity measures are integrated into clinical operations and how they really are shaping some of the, the trial approaches.
Yeah, well, I mean, the draft guidance for diversity from the FDA, really supports the demand for patients to be given equitable access to clinical studies. Right? There's a goal, and I attended the Scope conference last month, and we talked a lot about this in the diversity track, the need for and the desire for each patient to be seen in a clinical study, right? And not have entire subgroups of patients be underrepresented in the research that is used to approve new treatments on the basis of safety and efficacy. So sponsors are approaching that mandate, differently. Admittedly, some are focused more on achieving on paper metrics for things like racial and ethnic study population distributions, and others are digging deeper to understand those social and economic barriers to equitable participation and executing pilot programs all the way down to the local level to lower those barriers. We're all really on the learning curve here, right? And it's a little bit interesting to think about, because I'm sure that if you ask an epidemiologist, many would say, no, duh, right? Like, this is a problem that we've known about for a really long time over here on the real world. So it's great that you're all catching up with us. But at the same time, there's the need to understand on the clinical development side what metrics are the most meaningful to set goals around, and what strategies and solutions operational leaders need to deploy in order to meet those goals, and then how we meaningfully measure success, right? So I would say that even though we're all very enthusiastic about where this is going, we're still in the process, right? And operational leaders are at the forefront of identifying and deploying the solutions that equalize study access, learning to use data to make that happen, including data like what Inovalon has and the social drivers data that we have. Seen some really innovative things coming out of study teams, particularly those with individuals who are focused on those more end-to-end approaches, right? Measuring and executing DE&I in trials, and really bringing real-world data in, right, in order to help that happen. One of the big challenges there is, of course, data linking, which is something that we should maybe talk about here.
Yeah, I mean, Allison explained, tokenization to us, and I think we better understand it now. It makes sense to me, but yeah, we're not there yet. I mean, Allison, maybe you can share some of the challenges we still face in linking disparate data sets? And, Jen, you can comment on how that might affect clinical trial emerging data too, but Allison, maybe you can help us. What else do we need to solve?
Well, I think there's a common misconception that the hardest part in all of this is linking the data, the actual technical linking of the data. That's very well solved for in the US healthcare data market for many different types of data: closed claims data, electronic health records, disease registry, laboratory data, consumer data, social drivers of health. Like, that's been solved for. There's great entities out there that help facilitate that with different data partners. And we often get the question, gosh, how long is it going to take to link the data? And to us, we go, well, that's kind of the easy part to us. That's the quick part for us. The hard part is all of the work that goes on long before you ever start linking any data. And it's really thinking through, what is your research strategy? What are the questions you're trying to answer? What are the right data sets that are going to really help solve for what you're looking for? If you bridge data together, is it going to have sufficient sample size? What's the selection bias? Is it only picking up patients who may have been tested in one particular setting of care, but not all settings of care? Is it representative of the underlying population for whom a future therapeutic might be appropriate? And also thinking through the analysis plan. Christy, you've taught me that you can't just throw every social driver of health into a model and look at p-values and have that be your answer for, okay, here's the areas where we're going to focus and invest. It's much more complicated than that. Really understanding the relationship between different factors, what's a true driver, how the measure is actually captured in order to inform that model development. I think that's a really well thought out statistical analysis plan is so crucial, and something that we would all love to spend more time on to making sure that we're getting to the right answers.
Absolutely. And all those changes that Allison just mentioned really come home to roost in the linked applications of clinical trials and real world data, because there's those added considerations of, fitness for purpose for the regulatory facing evidence, right? With all of those things, but with a heightened, sort of gravitas to them.
Guys, this has been such a great discussion. And Allison, we call that a conceptual basis, right? Yeah, you can't just throw the kitchen sink into these models. Sometimes you're going to get some significant stuff, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't understand why would income impact the likelihood to be readmitted to the hospital. So always look for that conceptual basis before you say something is associated with something else. So
a very wise biostatistician that I really look up to once told me, who's also a tremendous female leader in and of her own right, that if you throw enough variables into a model, then something will be statistically significant. So just because it's significant doesn't mean that it's meaningful.
Yes. That's why I'm not a big fan of the AI models, because you get an answer and it might be predictive, but you have no idea why or what's driving. If it's a model, predicting who's going to be hospitalized, you have no idea why, right? We like to understand the whys and what's really driving this. Is it income? Is it education? Is it your clinical characteristics? So we can talk about this all day long, as you guys probably can sense by now. We love talking about this stuff. We love the work that we do. We're doing some really innovative things with real world data, obviously, at Inovalon. That's why we all come to work every day. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. Before we close, I just want to underscore that Jen and Allison are going to be presenting that ISPOR webinar. It's April 3rd, so don't miss that, because you're going to learn more about RCT data, connecting trials to real world data. So be sure to listen to that. We're also going to have teams on site at AMCP in New Orleans, at Assembia, which is going to be in Las Vegas, as well as at ISPOR this spring. Stop by and see us and talk to us about our tremendous work that we're doing in our data assets. I'm actually going to be presenting at Assembia on May 1st. With Dr. Boris Babson from Harvard Medical School, who we've been working closely with over the past year or so, in a session that's really focused on exploring data-driven solutions to improving medication access, medication adherence, and outcomes. So I'd love to meet you all there. Also look on April 8th for the release of our 4th white paper, which is actually also based on our research collaboration with Harvard Medical School. And what we've been doing is looking at the effectiveness of the two types of Medicare Advantage versus Medicare fee-for-service. And some of the findings have been really groundbreaking and striking. So this paper is going to talk about the importance of plan design in Medicare Advantage, and how plans' financial generosity, their coverage design, like copays and its premiums, how that really can address socioeconomic, health disparities. So that one's going to be fun. We're going to do a webinar on that end of April 22nd. So lots of things coming up. As you can tell, we're busy. We're excited. And we'd like to do this again sometime. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.